Hello and welcome everybody. Today we have a special guest, Mr. Daniel Keller with, of course, the Web3 project Flux. We're going to basically sit you guys down and do an AMA. I'm going to be leading, of course, in with a few questions that I have for Daniel myself, and then we will kind of spin off and get some questions from chat near the end. We have about an hour because I do have meetings later, so bear with us as we get through that. But Daniel, welcome to the show. Thanks for stopping by.
Hey man, thank you for having me on. And you know, I got to tell you, when I was watching your one live stream and you were talking about the parallel assets, I'm like screaming at the screen. I'm like, I've got to talk to him. So I reached out and you got back to me right away. And I appreciate that, man. Really respect the content you put out there in your community as well. Very, very educated. And it's always nice to come and speak with them.
Awesome. Well, here's the new scene for you guys, so you can have both of us up, and then I'll switch between them as we chit chat. So yeah, let's hop right into it. Let's get the I guess the elephant in the room addressed, and that's going to be parallel assets. So my biggest question surrounding parallel assets is not so much how much can we earn, how much are the drops or anything like that, but from the perspective of Flux themselves, because obviously we're talking about interoperability. That's going to be important for a cryptocurrency project, but we also introduce a ton of risks whenever that is employed. And we can see that with the recent Luna Terra crash, and then of course the issues with Solana going down. So can you tell me what kind of processes do you have in place for vetting basically the parallel assets you decide to participate with, and what kind of backups you have in case one of these projects ends up becoming a bad actor or going down the wrong path?
Yeah, so when we set out and we started to design the interchain operability with Flux, we had to put some criteria together so that we would find projects that made logical sense to add to the platform. So in our first iteration that we did, we added, Binance Smart Chain, which obviously people want to utilize for the DeFi piece, ETH because, well, it's ETH. Solana was one because Solana the ecosystem was developing fairly quickly at that time. And I still think in the end, Solana will be okay, although it's not my number one project, but I can tell you what we can do to help Solana in the long run to become more decentralized. But each one of these projects, we sit down, we look at it as a team, we look at, what they're doing as a community. We engage our community for their input. We say, what do you want to see in Flux for a parallel asset, and what would you use? Because we don't want to add something that's just kind of, a dead chain or something that just doesn't work. And, I would say specifically to address one of your concerns that you chatted about on your live stream was the Solana ecosystem. It's real easy because I'm a proof of work guy to always take the proof of work side of the house and say proof of work or nothing. And I'm not a fan of proof of stake, but as projects continue to build and iterate, and as they do become more popular, it does bring more demand for us to be able to provide PAs for them to participate. It doesn't mean we have to like every project that's picked. I hate Tron, and Tron is one on there as well. And you and I were kidding about that before we went live. I mean, these different projects, there's always inherent risk. We're in disruptive technology. So, the things that we do come with risk overall, but we always made it so that you could get out of whatever chain, was possibly having the problems. Like in this Solana instance, if you don't want to be in the Solana ecosystem, come back to Flux. You can always come home. So, I mean, I think we learn things as we grow. The Terra Luna ecosystem collapse, we had actually started to build that out. And it was just by, good grace that they collapsed prior to us deploying it, or we would have tested that conventional theory of bringing it all home again. So, but we are very, very, very focused on making sure that the assets that we add, they make sense. It's a tangible ad. It's something that's giving back to our community.
And one of the things that happened with Solana in particular is you guys paused basically the services for the Fusion portion of the ZIL Core app. What kind of control do you guys have over that in particular, and what kind of influenced your decision to go ahead and shut that off?
So at that particular point in time when the Phantom slash wallet hack was happening, we weren't completely positive this wasn't like a downstream thing, like coming from Solana itself. And to protect our users, to be able to make sure that they weren't getting compromised, we paused that Solana. I mean, that's just, we have an internal process around anytime a security or vulnerability would come up. We have a process that goes into play, and that's why we paused Fusion. That didn't mean that you couldn't still participate in the Solana ecosystem with your Flux. It would have been dog shit slow because they were really getting beat up, but you were still there. And we wanted to make sure that if somebody was compromised on that side of the fence, they were bringing the funds back over and putting it into the Flux and then taking it to an exchange and selling it. So, from our standpoint, does that feel a little centralized? It does. And Fusion's a tad centralized because, it's iterative technology. Our ultimate goal is to always have things be completely decentralized. That's what Flux is here for. That's why we are working to build it out. But everything is iterative. It's multiple steps. The first version of Fusion that was released does have some air of centralization to it. I'll be the first to say it. The next version of Fusion will have less of an air of decentralization, and the third pass will be completely decentralized. So in this particular case, it was nice that we had it so we could turn it off and protect our users. But it's not, in the grand scheme of things, it's not the way we want it to be all over.
And that kind of does lead us into the other elephant in the room, which is the centralization of Flux to a certain extent. And there was a quote that I use quite frequently that says, if any part of a project is centralized, then the entire portion of that is of that entire project is then compromised and centralized. What are your thoughts in response to that sort of ideal?
I think that, with all due respect to you, I think the quote's horseshit. I think if you're building a product out, there is going to be iterative process, and like the entire example of Web 2 to Web 3. Am I a maximalist that if you're not developing on Web 3 and you have particular parts of your project in Web 2 that project is trash? No, it's going to be an iterative process. So, and I want to make sure that you understand something as well. There is a difference between what Flux is doing and what Zelcore is doing. Flux is a decentralized platform throughout. I would say that one area where we continue to keep working on and it's kind of limiting us is Fusion, but Zelcore is a multi-asset platform, and it runs on top of Flux. So when we sit down and we look at things, we look at where can we be safe, secure, private, and how can we make it decentralized? So, for instance, as we were building out, Flux, we realized that we were going to need a self-sovereign ID. Well, that was ZIL ID. We realized that we could use two-factor authentication from Google, or we could go build our own decentralized two-factor authentication, and we built that. So, as we continue to kind of keep growing and moving forward, there are always areas where we're going to improve, especially as we add new products to the ecosystem. They may have some centralized components to it, but not, the ultimate goal is to get rid of those. So I would say that, the quote is a maximalist quote. It's saying if everything in the project isn't decentralized, it's not decentralized. And I disagree with that. I think we're in iterative technology. If it was a fully baked product, it'd already be in place and it'd already be running. We're building what has never been built before. And to do that, a lot of times you have to use all the tools in your quiver. So, Flux, I would put Flux up against any other project out there in terms of decentralization. Maybe not Bitcoin, but, even Bitcoin, you could argue, okay, well, you have these large mining farms that have, a gazillion, gazillion parts a hash or whatever, I think we're kind of in this weird area where we're moving and we're learning and we're moving more toward decentralization across the whole ecosystem.
So as far as Bitcoin, I would say the bigger problem is the mining pools a lot less than maybe the mining farms themselves as far as concentrated hash and centralization goes. Now, when I speak about Flux, typically I give Flux the kind of the break on the side of it's a technology doing something that nothing else is doing. So at this point, if you are looking for, true Web3 and the ability to deploy applications on the blockchain, I don't see a better project currently available. So I'll give you that. I don't know that I agree that we say that you can have decentralized portions and centralized portions and then give the retail investors the I guess the PR move of saying we're all about decentralization. So I guess that's kind of where, from the tweets and the talking about it, where I kind of maybe butt heads a little bit with you on that. But
that's okay. Hey, that's okay. And honestly, we're always open for input. And if there are particular areas of the project where individuals want to see a deeper level of decentralization, and they can hear what we're doing, we'd be glad to have open dev meetings so that they can hear that these things are all iterative and they're all in flight. So, I mean, damn near everything on the project's in flight.
Well, that brings me to one point that I have a question about, which would be specifically nodes, and not the nodes from the processing transaction side or whatever, as far as like, for running the nodes for the decentralized applications, but specifically the process in which someone can spin up a mining pool or a solo mining operation. And that process doesn't seem to be exactly like open and decentralized to where anybody could build that, right? So if we take a traditional blockchain like Bitcoin or Ethereum even, or whatever, you can stand up your own infrastructure, build a node, and mine to that node without any approval process. Is that something you guys would consider allowing people to do in the future?
Well, first of all, I think mining pools are inherently centralized as a whole. I think you just kind of alluded to that as well. I mean, we've had many new pools come on board. The one thing that the one way we differ from a Bitcoin mining pool is the fact that there has to be parallel asset distribution, and we've tied that to the mining pools for now. That will continue to be worked on to the point where miners will actually be able to claim their own assets without having the mining pool be involved, which is our preference overall. Putting it in the hands of the miners and the node operators and having them do their thing. So the answer to your question is you could stand a node up today. In terms of mining to that node, and or having it as a mining pool, I don't know that it's on our roadmap to do something like that. And I would have to clarify with our CTO, but I would say we have really good pools in place. And, the argument I don't think is necessarily whether Flux has a decentralized component. It's the argument is our pools inherently centralized? And I believe the answer to that is yes. And I don't think either one of us would argue that.
Well, if the answer to that is yes, then why can't I at my mining farm spin up a server and throw a Flux node on there to be able to mine to it?
Oh, you absolutely can. You absolutely. We have
conventional. I thought that had to all be whitelisted.
No, we have no. That's only for the nodes that are running the decentralized compute network, and that whitelisting won't be there forever. That whitelisting is, again, an iterative process as we continue to build out. We're going to have our own repository. People will be able to deploy on demand. Jetpack 2.0 will bring a lot of that. But you can still run a conventional standard node in your farm, much like I did when, back in the days when I had my big farm as well. I had my node running there as well. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing stopping you from doing that.
Okay, I guess maybe I had a little bit of a confusion from the Discord as far as like how that process worked, et cetera.
Yeah, I think the bigger thing with what people bulk about is the lockups around running the actual node infrastructure, which is the decentralized infrastructure, the Web3 based kind of infrastructure. So, there is inherently, you have to have the asset to deploy the node, but that doesn't mean you can't run a Flux node.
Okay. And but because I guess it gets a little confusing can we make a distinction between a node where you actually stake some sort of flux or whatever, and then a node that you would utilize for basically consensus, right? And then mining to that. And those are two separate.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
So you can spin that node up right now as it sets. You could set up a stratum or a proxy to that to connect your miners on an internal network, and you're good to go.
Good to go. Okay. Yeah, it's no different than what any other proof of work project would do in that light.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because I think people get confused because they hear nodes, the node structure, and then they're thinking old school nodes like Bitcoin nodes and so on and so forth. So yeah, clearly those are two different things.
Right, and one would be closer to like traditionally what a master node would be, right? Well, not even, because you're not processing transactions other than the transactions for specifically, and maybe you can get this clarification for us, right? So part of my understanding and part of the confusion is you have the mining for the transactions, correct, on the Flux network. Yep. And then the nodes specifically, I don't know what we want to call them exactly. I feel like having two sets of nodes kind of makes it confusing, right? But
we'll call them Flux nodes. You got Flux nodes, and then you got standard nodes. Yeah. So you can go to our Block Explorer, click on the list of nodes, and you can see the standard nodes running. Okay. Magic Bean is there. You can see everything that's out there.
Okay. So
yeah.
Okay. So do those also process the transactions for the people that are renting from it, as far as the Flux nodes go, or are all the transactions still done on the mining network, and then basically the Flux nodes are just there for processing the data in the Web3 infrastructure?
So Flux nodes are there for processing the data and Web3 infrastructure. The regular nodes are transactional validators. That's just like conventional Bitcoin nodes. They do exactly the same. I mean, really, we're a fork of Bitcoin if you want to get down to brass tacks. Fork of Zcash, removed all ZK snarks, got all that out of there. So really what we are is a Bitcoin infrastructure that's running our Flux nodes on top of that.
So I think the best way maybe to clear this up for everybody, if you're running a Flux node, you're getting a payout from the people that are essentially renting that processing power from you, but that payout and the fees to process that transaction are being paid out to the miners.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So hopefully that clears all of that up, because I think like there's definitely like some confusion surrounding that. So I want to make sure we all get it.
Yeah,
correct.
and I invite anybody out there that they want to learn more about it, or if they have questions, stop by our Discord. They don't let me tech much, but but I'm sure somebody can give you an even better explanation than what I just did. I tried. I tried.
All right. So, as far as announcements, I hear you do have an announcement for us today. Do you want to get into that and let us know what's going on?
Yeah, I sure do. I'm really, really excited. Okay, so we talked earlier about how, we evaluate these different projects, and we had picked two, Avalanche and Cosmos, were our next assets to add. And we sat down and we had a little bit of a come to Jesus meeting with the team, and we said, how do we want to, advance moving forward? We definitely still want the Cosmos ecosystem eventually as a parallel asset. They're doing some very unique stuff over there, whether you like, the proof of stake or not. They're doing some interesting stuff, right? But my request to the team was, can we get back to basics, and can we add a platform that is a proof of work platform that will continue to help us bolster the proof of work? Because right now, especially with the Ethereum fork coming up, now it's super important, now more than ever, for us to have really solid projects that are proof of work projects. And I'd like to announce that we're still going to do the Cosmos ecosystem. That will be an asset in the future. But we are announcing that we are going to add the Ergo asset to our parallel asset chain. So there's a lot of folks out there that are really going to be happy to hear this. And I think it's really going to be a good add for us. The Ergo team is great. They have the same ethos that we do. They love proof of work. They're very engaging. We've had really good, solid conversations with them around some of the things that are going to happen. So what does that look like? So there's about four different things that are going to happen here. The first one is the addition of Ergo as a parallel asset. So you'll have Flux Ergo on the Flux network. The second part of that will be the addition to ZIL Core. So Ergo will finally get the wallet that they deserve as a platform. So we're really excited about that. And the third one is we are also looking into and considering the integration of the Ergo DEX into ZIL Core as well. So that's part 3.
Nice.
So and obviously the addition of the new asset to the DEX as well. So, our ultimate goal is really this is a win-win across the board. And especially with us, proof of work projects can stick together and really start to build out, this interchain operability. And as I started to fall down the Ergo rabbit hole, I was like, it makes sense to do it now because, we've got the ETH fork coming up. We've got all these challenges around proof of stake. Let's go back to basics and let's get a proof of work project in there.
Awesome. I'm super happy to hear that. Obviously, Ergo having some more liquidity options with the ZIL Core wallet is going to be amazing as well. Now, ZIL Core doesn't have and correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as asset management, so NFTs, etc., ZIL Core doesn't have that built in, but you mentioned something along those lines.
Oh boy, I tell you, you got me being leaky Dan today. I'm sorry to the guys for doing this, but yes, we are going to add NFT support as well to ZIL Core, so you'll be able to hold your Cardano, Solana, Ethereum NFTs, but you really could extend that to any different platform. That's coming with the next version release of ZIL Core. So we have a new UI UX that's coming out, which I think we put a lot of focus into our community. We did surveys, we did early adopters, we've had beta testers, 50 plus beta testers over the past several weeks, and we've got input from everyone. So if you participated in that survey and you gave input back to the community, we took it directly back to the team and they looked at it. So yeah, I think that's really gonna be a real positive add for the Ergo ecosystem.
Awesome. Yeah, that'll be great because I think as far as proof of work projects go, they're probably the furthest along at their level on the NFT side of things, and doing some really interesting stuff with them too, because you're going to get the Aneta Angel portion is really interesting with additional mining rewards. Should be kind of fun to see all that kind of come together. Now, there was a question surrounding Flux and hardware wallets. What is your suggestion on Flux with hardware wallets, or maybe having some sort of cold storage option for your Flux? What would be the best way?
So it is on our short list to add hardware wallet capability. We want to do it probably a little bit different than what other people are doing it. And I can't give you a ton of details, but it's going to look a little bit different. So for all intents and purposes, ZIL Core is more like a warm wallet, but if your interface was linked to, a back end, you could have a cold wallet easily integrated into that as well. So it's on the list. We're working on it. It's one that I think is smart. If you want to hold your Flux on a cold wallet right now, you can do that by holding one of the tokens. So let's say you want to hold the ETH pairing. You can put that onto your Ledger or Trezor as an ETH pairing. So there are options out there. I would say that, I think probably people want a more full function integration. So they want to open up ZIL Core and have their assets stored on X wallet and, be able to interact between the two. So, and I think that's a heavy lift, and there's only one other project that's been able to really do it. So we're really excited to work on that down the road here.
Cool. And then I had, I think it was one more question surrounding, ZIL Core and specifically the parallel assets and the need for liquidity on other chains with Flux. Have you guys noticed that there are liquidity issues? I see that some of these chains have very low liquidity when trying to swap, into Flux, like let's say on Solana or ETH, and having a wrapped version of that. And then do you guys have any plans to promote that liquidity, or do you see it as not as much of an issue?
Well, I would say if you look at the crypto ecosystem overall, I think everybody's struggling with liquidity right now. I think there is definitely some challenges around that, and they have to incentivize individuals to really bring in liquidity to those different parallel assets. So I know we have, on ETH and Binance Smart Chain, there's pools there, liquidity pools there. So yeah, it's always something that we're looking at. I kind of like, I'm an old school cypherpunk. I believe in creating it, and if people want to use it, they're going to use it. If they're not, then don't use it. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think there is definitely a need for liquidity, but I think it needs to be holistic and organically grown. And I think it's going to take a little while for that to happen. Because remember, if you've never launched a crypto project, your biggest challenge is getting the liquidity and getting on large exchanges and getting it in front of people. Well, Flux has not only done that on the Flux side, but now it's doing it on every single one of these parallel assets. So, instead of having one concentration, which is just your primary platform, you have multiple concentrations. So this is where the community comes into play. And if you're out there listening right now and you want to participate in these ecosystems, get up and get moving, stand up a liquidity pool, do something for the project, man. Like I love to see the community come in and do those kind of things.
Yeah, and it can actually be, and there's probably some content there for myself too, right? Which is like, okay, you got to add liquidity on all these different chains. How do you do it? Which chains can you interact with, and where do you interact with them to add that liquidity, right? But that is a community thing. And I like that you guys are going to go with the organic growth instead of trying to force that through. I think that is the better approach at the end of the day. However, it is slower, but like I've said before, I think slow and low is probably the best way to cook brisket and probably the best way to handle crypto.
Amen. Yeah, amen. And I would say this: if you're willing to educate yourself about arbitrage, there are tons of opportunities in these parallel asset areas where you can build your Flux position. So, although it looks kind of, for somebody that wants to sell a bunch or buy a bunch, it's the liquidity challenges. Somebody that's in there arbitraging this, and I'm not a financial advisor or don't even play one on TV or anything like that. It's an opportunity, and we see a lot of folks in the ecosystem playing that, that arbitrage opportunity.
Nice. And then I think we're going to get into questions and answers. So as always, guys, super chats are never required, always appreciated. First to be read because they are the easiest to be read as they are highlighted in the YouTube chat. Tagging @SonOfATech will highlight the message orange, and then I will be able to relay that message to Daniel if you guys have a question specifically for him. Or, of course, if it's for me, you can go ahead and ask those questions. I think primarily we're going to be asking you questions, though, today, Daniel. So that is what we're going to go with as far as all of that is concerned. And then I'm going to ask the question while you guys start getting yours in about what do you think about the merge? Do you think it's really coming in September? And how do you think that's going to impact the miners as far as GPU miners go, not necessarily ASIC miners?
I think that's going to be an interest. You and I were talking about this before the call. These are the good times. These are the fun times. I like to see these things materialize. Be a little bit of chaos at first, but that's okay.
Do you think it's going to come in September?
I do think it's going to come in September because I'll be honest with you, in business, if you continue to keep promising things year after year and you can't deliver, eventually you have to rip that Band-Aid off and you have to deliver and you have to take the consequences that come with it. So, I think ETH has backed themselves into a wall because they're not even the best ETH out there, in my opinion. There are other projects that are doing what ETH is doing. I think what KDA is doing on their network is vastly superior than what Ethereum is doing. So they're not even the best version of ETH. So you have to rip the Band-Aid off. You have to get moved over. And at this point in time, one more delay would basically destroy the project, at least in my honest opinion. Because I just don't see how large institutional investors, because really, ETH is a centralized, asset. I don't think anyone would argue with that. Consensus, all those folks are, they own it, right? So, my thing is they have to move. And at least from a Flux standpoint, man, we are sure as hell hoping they move.
And from a Flux standpoint, is that because you are hoping for an increase of security on the network?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, I always tell people when you're looking and doing due diligence on projects, you look at the people that are running the project, and you look how their stance on miners are. And I would like to see, no pun intended, an influx of miners specifically around community and building out the project. Bitcoin didn't have a marketing and PR team. It did it through community and through people that stood up infrastructure and started running it. And it's been the same way with Flux. So are there other projects out there that are going to compete for hash rate? Absolutely. And there's good projects out there. And I just recommend to anyone that's looking at where they're going to park the rig, go look at those projects and figure out whether or not you're going to be valued. Because at Flux, we value our miners as much as we value our node owners, which as much as we value our community. And there's not a lot of projects out there that could say that.
So Detroit Iris says, at Savatech, when running a Flux node, can you still GPU mine on that machine? And I don't see exactly why not, unless you're maxing out the resources on that machine. So that is all going to be determinate on basically what Flux node you decide to do and what the system requirements for that node are.
Yep.
And if the CPU can handle giving the work and passing that off to the GPU that's in the same system or not. If you have enough resources, it's not going to be a problem though.
You just answered it, bud.
Cool.
Right on.
Lazarus says, ask Savatech when Caspa on Zelcore. I don't think that Caspa would be one that you would have on Zelcore. Caspa's not going to be ready for quite some time. They're currently moving over to basically rewriting all of their code from Go into Rust, which I think is a great move, but that's a lot of work, and they have a small development team. So I wouldn't expect them to be seeing any sort of massive listings or anything, any kind of interoperability work until the Rust conversion is done. Unless Daniel knows something I don't know, that would be.
So are they their own chain?
Yes, they're pretty new. What they're focused on though too, and that people need to be aware of, is that they are working on heavy hash, which is going to be optical proof of work, which is the laser mining. Those boards aren't even ready yet for the most part. It's kind of the next iteration of proof of work, probably like the next iteration of FPGA or maybe ASICs to put you kind of in that idea. Right now, early on, it started out as CPU mineable, then it went to GPU mineable. It's going down the same path as pretty much all of the other cryptocurrencies as far as that's concerned, but the end goal is to be optical proof of work. So
were they a scratch? So in other words, they made the chain from scratch, or
yes.
were they a fork of something?
No,
okay.
they're from scratch. You should definitely look into them. They're great.
Check it out.
A great grassroots project, and they're from scratch, and they were built in Go initially. Right now, they're working on actually reprogramming into, like I said, into Rust, which I think is a good move.
That is a good move. And the other thing is we love projects that are like incubation acceleration. So I'll pass this on to the Zelcore team as well, and they let me they let me give them some suggestions every now and again. So I will definitely put that on my list.
Cool. Rod Putt says, at Savatech, I often hear that people pay a lot of fees to swap with coins with Zelcore. Is that correct? I've never had any problem with that. I think they're doing it wrong. So I think that if we're talking about Zelcore, we have multiple different options within Zelcore to process your transactions and do your swaps. And it's going to depend on which option you decide to choose. There are built-in centralized exchange options even in there. And then, of course, there's the Fusion app, which is going to go through DeFi. And then you have the fees that vary within the networks that they have on the platform. So fees on ETH are going to be a lot higher than fees on Binance Smart Chain. Yep. And so depending on what people are doing, if they haven't educated themselves, I could see it very likely that they have this perception that they spent too much on fees. But that's an education problem, I think, at the end of the day. Do you have anything to add to that, Daniel?
Yeah, I would say this too. I think they're, especially within Zelcore, the only real real fee that Zelcore actually charges is through the Fusion app. And just as you alluded to, there's gas for the native chain that you're moving to from, and then there's a fee on top of that for the movement. Other than that, there's no fees in Zelcore. I mean, anywhere, all of the APIs that we use for the secondary exchanges. So, just any of the convenience quick swap exchanges, they all have fees integrated that come from them. So we're only providing the service as a landing point. We're not determining the fee structure. And then, our goal is to always get those fees lower for everyone. And I think as we continue to see, I mean, if you're working in KDA, there's damn near no fees at all. They have a gas station model that they use going back and forth. It's a few flux to move through Fusion. I mean, even major exchanges. If you're, this space has this like weird connotation because anytime you say the word fee, everybody gets up in an uproar. But ultimately, fees are used not only to secure the network. You have to have some fees in place or people spam the shit out of you. But it also helps these projects develop. So, I would say this, if you're fee conscious, look at going to centralized exchanges to do your swaps. It's going to be cheaper than Zelcore because obviously there are second party or third party integrations in there for quickness. The other thing is get Zelcore Plus and use like a Binance or a Coinbase and do it directly out of there. You can always lower your fees, but you're going to have to be really conscious of doing it.
Right. So Texas A says, is it possible to run a node on bare metal without exposing your IP address? I don't see why not. Of course, VPN services that are going to have dedicated IPs are probably going to be a little bit more expensive. So that would be...
I don't see an issue either. And that's one that we definitely want to forward toward our CTO as well. So, because I can't speak to that completely. So, but I don't see why not.
Yeah. You would have to have, I think, a static IP or a static VPN.
Yep.
Caveman Mining says, "Ask Son of a Tech, can Dan talk about how Flux is competing with AWS and Google's of the world?"
Well, that's the funny part is everybody always asks us, they say, who's your competition? I was just on a call earlier today and somebody said, well, who's the closest competition you have in the space? And I said, well, in the crypto space, there's no one that I know of. There are other projects that are attempting to do decentralized compute, but they're doing it in a different way. And they have a bit more of an air of centralization to them, but they're continuing to iterate just like anyone else. I think our closest competitor right now is obviously AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google, the big players of the space. So, we're super conservative. We have a 5-year plan. We have a percentage of what we believe we can take from that market share. And we're going to get there by, being good stewards of our resources and working with new projects that want to come online. So I would say you're not going to see us, because people always in the crypto space, and especially on crypto Twitter, they want you to take jabs at who they believe is your competition. There isn't anyone in there that I believe is competition. They're all opportunities. I could see us working with Filecoin to provide some level of storage. I could see us working with, other providers who are doing like, what Akash is doing in their compute cycles. These are all things that as technology continues to grow up, logically, we're going to grow together. So, instead of being tribalistic and talking about like these are my bags and these are the best bags, we need to start talking about, advancing the blockchain space. And Flux has done that by basically ignoring all the white noise. We just don't listen to people. We listen to our community and the valuable information that comes from them, not the bullshit. Okay. But the valuable information that comes from them. And that's kind of what we do. So yes, I think we will be competing with AWS. I think if you were going to compare us to them, let's say we're Amazon, year 2, year 3, as Amazon was building out their platform, they realized they had compute needs and they went and they built the framework that is AWS. Then they said, well, if we can do it for ourselves, we can do it for other people. So we are in the same process where we said we need decentralized compute and we build it for the crypto sector, but now we can provide that framework to the standard technology stack.
And that does bring up, I'm curious, do you have any more insight on the solution to persistent storage?
Yeah, actually, we have persistent storage in play right now. It's in beta. So we recently deployed IPFS with clusters. We have our own persistent storage model. So we didn't go to a third party and try to get persistent storage through a third party. We actually developed it in house, and it's in beta right now as we speak. So I think you'll see our persistent storage target hit on Q4, which is huge because then it's on like Donkey Kong. Because we'll have geolocations, we'll have Jetpack 2.0, easy onboarding, we'll have persistent storage, we'll have redundant failovers, we'll have Web 2, Web 3 integration toolkit. So that's when we start moving really, really fast. So I'm excited for it, and I think persistent storage is going to be a big piece of it.
That's exciting. And then for the persistent storage portion, from the community standpoint, is that going to be something that node operators provide, or is there a potential to have some sort of revenue generation for the community based off of the persistent storage, or do you have an answer for that yet?
Well, yeah, Nat, you always want to get me to leak shit, man. You do ask the best questions, some of the best questions. I can tell you that right now. Flux is always about giving back to the community to give to us. So, there would definitely, as we start to build out our economic model, because really Flux OS is built on a Linux distribution model. It's you've deployed on Flux. It's damn cheap, right? Mm-hmm. So there's not much revenue generation there. But as we start to ratchet up and we start to get more businesses deploying, that revenue model starts to go up. And of course, our community and the individuals that participate in the community will be incentivized as well, because we would be remiss not to plan accordingly to the folks that are providing our resources, not to incentivize them and continue to keep engaging them, because it's a lot harder to go out and get new folks than it is to incentivize the folks that are already providing you bulletproof infrastructure.
Awesome. Cool. So let's see. There's a few more questions in here, and so we're going to try to get through them. I have maybe about another 15 minutes before I got to go. I think the big one that we need to get into, though, because I see this question asked a lot, is where are we at with proof of useful work?
So proof of useful work, if you ask me what the most exciting part of the project that we're working on is proof of useful work, and we recently partnered with the University of Geneva in Switzerland and their educational institutions around helping us to build these concepts out. We have had our very first meeting for proof of useful work. You can see that on our YouTube if you want to go check it out, and I'll walk you through the model of what we're doing. It looks a lot different, to be quite honest with you, than when I started thinking about what proof of useful work, when I read the MIT paper on useful proof of work. And I'm glad that it shifted. I'm glad that, because ultimately proof of useful work is not being built for Flux. It's being built for the entire community. So, and I say community, I mean blockchain as a whole, the proof of work community as a whole. So I think you could see different projects using that algorithm, using that setup to be able to provide to their community to participate in the network as well, and gain extra rewards. So again, hard push for interchain operability, hard push for decentralization, and big one that has kicked us in the butt here recently is the environment. And Flux, with proof of useful work, aims to be carbon negative. And then, of course, everybody always says, okay, how is a proof of work project carbon negative? Well, it's basically a scientific computation. And that is, if you have demand and you have resources, so graphics cards, CPUs, FPGAs, whatever it is, right? And you supply those to the individuals with demand, it basically negates the consensus mechanism. It's so these people don't have to go buy hardware. So like these I don't know if you knew this or not, but most of these educational institutions have to build like mini mining farms for rendering. Mm-hmm. Well, now you don't have to do that. So now we have more evergreen technology. So now these graphics cards are lasting longer. Somebody that had a 1050 Ti, 1060 Ti, 1070, my workhorse, by the way, I love my 1070s, 1080s, whatever. You're not ripping it down for the next iteration just because, you know, it's required, more is required. Now you can deploy that on proof of use of work, and there's strength in numbers.
Right. Okay. So a big thing, like obviously one of the more technical side of it for proof of useful work from actually constructing a mining rig is going to be the amount of PCI lanes that are available to the GPU, because presumably proof of useful work will need access to more than just, you know, one PCI lane.
It will.
So are we looking at probably an infrastructure upgrade for people that want to support it once that algorithm is shifted over?
What I can say is there's nothing determined yet, but I would say you're definitely going to have to address that. Yeah. So there will be criteria to participate in proof of use work, but it will be rewarding because you'll not only be receiving your block part of your block reward and as you know, mining, but you'll also be receiving part of the proof of use work model.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. We have one big one. Daryl's really wanting to get this in, so let's make sure we get it answered for him. He says, please discuss bridge security in Flux. Now, I guess I need more clarification specifically on what he means by bridge security, unless you know.
Fusion.
So, okay.
Fusion, essentially fusion.
Because you're bridging between
bridging between. So, I mean, we take security very, 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 very seriously. You know, because it's Fusion is built inside of ZIL core and built on top of Flux. Obviously, you know, we got decentralization, you got encryption on top of that as well. The actual gateway or bridge that you want to talk about, it's handled a little bit like a centralized exchange in the sense that it's going from point A to point B, but it's all on chain. So I'm probably not the one to get into the nitty gritty details, but I will tell you this, you know, it is of utmost importance that, you know, and we saw this with the Solana ecosystem piece the other day. We have to have that security piece in place. We have to protect our users. So, you know, what I can do is I can have a technical call put together with our CTO and get into exactly that.
Okay. And we could get together a bunch of questions on the technical side. I think
that'd be great.
The community, and if you want to organize that with me, you can just hit up the Calendly link I already sent you, and we can kind of go from there. I think that needs to wrap it up for me right now. Thanks, Daniel, for coming on and for answering everything. So obviously, like the big one, we're going to be seeing Ergo as a parallel asset in the near future. I think that's going to be amazing, and also offer additional liquidation options for Ergo, which is great as well. We have the NFT integration into ZIL core coming at some point down the line, which is going to be amazing. And we have proof of useful work kind of still in its infancy, it seems like at this point.
Yep.
So I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yep. Well, thanks for having me on, and thank you to your community for all the questions. And if we didn't get to something and it's pressing for you, come on over and visit us and drop a question in our Discord. We're more than happy to help. Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks everybody. I'll see you next Tuesday.